Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly ag weather update brought to you by Farm Credit. We're going to start with some satellite data from Sunday. And what we're watching here over the weekend was two very large low pressure systems, a deeper one over the Great Lakes, and then a secondary low that was kind of pivoting around the southern side of this that began life over Texas, came through parts of the south, and then right up here through parts of the Georgia, the Carolinas into the mid-Atlantic. It was this storm system that on Sunday produced some pretty deep convection, including some strong storms in this part of North Carolina. And also, I'm sure you heard in the news about the tornado that came out of parts of Virginia from this right along the coast. This delivered a pretty cold punch here to the midsection of the country as well, where we're still waiting to get this crop established for corn, soybean guys here. Just something to be thinking about. And the other thing this storm system did reveal to us was just how much snow is still in the west. So just take a look. You'll see the clouds move over the top of the snow. We still have a lot of snowpack throughout the Rockies, this Sierra Nevada, and up into the Cascades, which you can't really see very well here because of the cloud cover. But this pattern has got this highly amplified look to it. A big ridge over the west, this deep trough that's got two systems rotating around it here coming up the east. And we're going to be kind of the last holdout as the pattern begins to shift on the cooler weather. So I do have a cooler forecast coming up for much of the southeast from Georgia up to North Carolina here. But first, I want to show you some stats on precip. So if we look back over the last 3 days, this is weekend total precipitation, at least through late in the evening on Sunday when I record these. Parts of Georgia getting into North and South Carolina here, picking up in some places, well over 2 inches of rainfall. Heavier rainfall getting up farther to the north of that. And what's important about these rains is that even though they are delaying a lot of work, okay, this is slowing some folks down, getting some of the crops established. The moisture's there, it's getting into the soil. It's not leading to any early season drought concerns. And that's, to be honest, I often think about the longer term hydrology than the short term kind of pullbacks we have to have in terms of our field work. So just to keep an eye on that. In fact, I'd like to show you that another way. This is the latest update for the last 30 days of precipitation as a percent of normal. There are a couple of dry pockets in Georgia, but a bunch of severe weather in Florida, kicking off the wet conditions here. Coming to this part of Georgia, then most of North and South Carolina are sitting somewhere between 125 and over 225% of normal precipitation. It's been extremely wet. We've started to wipe out the drought issues that have been here in parts of the mid-Atlantic as well. But I want to make a point. While we did see some better rain sneak through the small corridor and through here of the winter wheat belt, north of that, getting into Nebraska, the rest of Kansas into Missouri, even pockets of Iowa and Illinois have been quite dry. So this is an area that we need to be seeing better precipitation, coming through. So I just want to give you that kind of broad perspective from here all the way to the Rocky Mountains. To look at another way of kind of analyzing this data, this map shows the month of April in terms of precipitation ranks. So just to make a point here, remember about a month ago we were concerned about how dry it was in parts of North Carolina, right? And here we are now talking about how we flipped over to second wettest April on record in this climate reporting district right in through here. Look, though, and just see other parts of the country where we are experiencing some dry weather this spring, and that's going to be areas that are going to need to see moisture returning because the soil moisture deficits here are something we don't want to carry into the rest of the growing season. So I'm specifically talking about corn and soybeans in this part of the country. So for you corn and soybean growers over here, keep that in mind. For the cotton growers, just take note that even though we have seen some storms that have come through parts of Texas, over here and around Lubbock, it's still been a drier go of it. Same thing for New Mexico, Arizona, and California. Very dry, month of April overall. And we have concerns about what the monsoon might do later this year, being pulled way back compared to what it has been for the last couple of years. Let's take this over to a quick temperature discussion as well, because we've seen a real transition at the end of this month of April and now the beginning of May toward colder weather. But this is what April is going to go down in the books looking like. Very cold in parts of the Pacific Northwest and Northern Plains. We were cooler than average across much of the South. The warmer bias was from Florida along the coast up here into parts of New England. Those were places that seem to consistently stay more mild. But this whole pattern has kind of been flipped on its head here to finish April and start the month of May. So these statistics they're washing out some of the signal we've seen here at the very end of the month. And this is the signal we're dealing with. From the April 20th through this weekend, we watched some ridging starting to take shape over the west. Here it is. And we ended up getting what we call an omega block. So it looks something like that. See how I traced that out? It looks like the Greek letter omega. Anytime you see a block, or I mention a block, it's normally where you have high pressure north of low pressure. That's it. That's kind of, and this is on a broad sense. I mean, we're covering thousands of miles here thinking about this. And what happens is when the jet stream has to make more of these turns to the north and then back to the south, it doesn't progress west to east. So this tends to leave lingering cold air in places for a while. And this is the trough of colder air that's going to be coming toward us for much of this week. All right. So thinking about that, here's another piece to this puzzle we need to be discussing. We saw a pretty major reset of the MJO. It's now back here over parts of Africa. But there is something important about this pattern that I think we're going to be watching happening through the month of May. A moment ago, I talked about how it's blocked up, right? But the MJO has started to really begin a progressive move. Normally what happens is it takes about 4 to 6 weeks to complete all of the phases. That's where it starts off, in this case near Africa, moves over the Indian Ocean, over Australia, out into Western Pacific, and then resets and does it again. Anytime you see us showing forecasts where all of the forecast ensemble members are making moves and going around the diagram, it goes around the diagram in a counterclockwise direction. That means the pattern's about to open up and start to move again. It's becoming, unblocked. It's starting to gain momentum once again. And thinking about that, I want to show you what the high pattern's going to do. Now, right now, here's that deeper trough I told you about as we look at early Monday morning. And there's the shortwave that's getting kicked around the back side of it. Here's the ridge in the west. Now, what I want you to notice is we're going to move this omega block. See it? Low, high, and low. And even though we've cut off a low over California, the flow is going to start to pick up speed a bit. And we're going to move this offshore late this week. You say, why not faster? Well, problem is you got a low trapped underneath a high. See that? We have to get rid of that in order to get this to move. So that's why this week is colder. But then what we notice is once we get out there, May 5th, going forward, we start to see the jet stream opening up into broader waves rather than getting caught in this high over low setup. So you see, we don't really have an omega block setting up anymore. No tightly bunched troughs and ridges. So that means going into next week, we're going to open the pattern up for some warmth. And I've also noted that as we go out here toward the middle of May, we have fast winds coming off the Pacific. They come into California, which is going to be cooler and wetter, and they bump over some sense of a ridge right in this area. And that means when we get ridges in May, we start to just see along this whole corridor moisture transport out of the Gulf and tend to see stormier conditions. We're going to come back to that in a few moments. But what this also does is it kind of finally gets rid of this. So we got locked into this colder pattern after that system went through this weekend. And it's going to be around for most of this week. This is the next 5 days. That's the map you're looking at. But as I transition out and just let this pattern open up, we notice that by day 5 through 10, so this gets us out to the 10th of May, we're seeing the end of this. So this has still got a little bit of the colder weather that's from late this week in it, because this is a 5-day moving window. But then you notice as the troughs dip in the west and the pattern opens up, we now start to see more mild conditions coming back in. So through mid-May, we're now seeing a return toward normal, even mild, warmer than normal conditions up here in the Carolinas. So that's an important transition that we're seeing. What I want to do next is I want to just keep going with the longer term here. And I want to show you a suite of things that were released by the Climate Prediction Center that I'm finding I'm gaining a lot of trust in. So this right now is the 6 to 10 day outlook. So that's what I just showed you. There's the warmth opening up. But notice the day 8 through 14, that's when the pattern begins to return more toward normal in terms of our temperatures. Keep an eye on the precip side of things though over here. The new week 3, week 4 outlook looks something like this. So at this point, we're going to watch the jet stream probably split a little bit over the west. And because of that, cooler conditions farther to the south, more mild conditions across the north. So this is going to be huge for the Corn Belt to really get established and get going. But drier conditions up here, a lot of people would welcome this given the snow melt that's happened and the flooding that's happening on the Red River and the northern branches of the Mississippi. Notice the models have got our region in equal chances. There's not a whole lot of strong signal that we're going to be seeing some trouble going out there that far. What I would like to do is I want to show you this. This is the new seasonal drought outlook. So if we just kind of look at the colors here, and we can kind of see over here what's going on in the Mid-Atlantic. I want to bring your focus back over here, though, to the plains. And what we've now seen is that we've seen improvement in the forecast for the drought into this corridor. All right. We've seen a couple of places where they're talking about drought development. We'll have to keep a very close eye on this, but some improvement here in parts of Nebraska. And I'll show you why I think the pattern might manifest itself like this as we go forward toward the beginning of summer. Last couple things to show you here. They also released a new 1-month outlook for the month of May. And I'll just say this, we may start off the month cooler, but I don't think we're going to finish it cooler. So don't get too hung up on this. And while we could have some drier conditions throughout the Midwest, I actually think this whole corridor is going to open up to quite a bit of thunderstorm activity, kind of where I just wrote that, almost looks like a letter D in this whole region for the month of May. I'm predicting a very stormy May overall. Okay, bigger picture, then we'll get back into the near-term forecast. This is what our current ocean temperatures look like. We got a few things to be on the lookout for. Our El Nino is developing rapidly. There is still, right here along the west coast, colder water. That's a part of something called the negative PDO. Now, to be honest, El Nino and the negative PDO are not necessarily strong signals for what the southeast up the east coast could experience in the longer term forecast. They're more a central United States and a western United States influencer. We see a lot of warm water in the Gulf and Caribbean and a lot of warm water in the Atlantic Main development region. But normally when there is an El Nino, we see stronger wind shear across this area. What I'll be watching out for, just to speak specifically about hurricanes, is I'm going to be watching the Gulf this year more than I have the last couple of years. I'm concerned that we're going to get systems to come out like this and potentially dump rain from Georgia up to North Carolina if they do come out in this area. That's just a thought. I think we're going to suppress a lot of hurricane activity farther out in the main development region. But just thinking about this, I want to show you what's going on beneath the surface. This animation goes from South America here over toward like Indonesia and Australia there, and this goes down. So this is depth. And this is the warm water. Watch it again in animation here. Let's get that restarted. This is the warm water that is sloshing back and surfacing, which means we're going to rapidly see these ocean temperatures increase. And if the atmosphere behaves like an El Nino, which is weak trade winds, then I think that this forecast could verify. I put this in several reports last week. It wasn't released by the time I did my video for you all last week, but right now the Bureau of Meteorology out of Australia is predicting that this El Nino could get up there around 2.8 C above average. That would make it stronger than the 82-83 El Nino, the 97-98 El Nino, and then the 2015-16 El Nino. That if it did in fact get to this point. Now, we need to put all that in context. So this is what I'd like to do. We've seen May, okay, in the forecast. We've kind of given an idea about what we expect May to be. What about June, July, August? So for the whole of the southeast, and this includes Georgia, North and South Carolina, and Virginia, so it comes right up the east coast a little bit as well. What we're looking at here is June through August precipitation anomalies. Now, we're not going to be able to do this well once we get into September, October, November, because individual years may have huge precipitation totals because of hurricanes, and it doesn't correlate as well as I'd like. But this is what I want to know. What does it take to be a really dry summer, and what does it take to be a really wet summer? So only using data from 1970 forward, so I'm not including back to 1895, but 1970 going forward, this is what it takes to go hot and dry. You're going to have a lot of happy Midwesterners and a lot of very unhappy people in the Southeast. It takes the Bermuda high, which normally lives here, to get pushed. Now, the reason why the Midwesterners are happy is because the flow comes around this, pulls the Gulf moisture, and shoves it right here in the Midwest. Okay? The reason why we are burned out, smoked out, and it's hot is because that ridge of high pressure is almost immovable. Now, thinking about it, since I'm talking about ocean temperatures, I want to show you. This is what the ocean temperatures look like June, July, and August whenever we've had these super hot, dry summers. Notice it was cooler here, cooler in the Gulf, cool off the West Coast, La Nina. We have none of that right now. And that's why right now I don't have any indications to tell you that I think this summer is going to be scorching hot with high pressure. If that changes, I will tell you. But right now, I just don't see it. So let me add another dimension to this. What about the really wet ones? The really wet ones had warm water off the West Coast. We don't have that. They had a developing La Nina. We don't have that either. And, you know, just thinking about it, those really wet years, it was because the Bermuda high sat right here. And it just, if it sits right there, okay, and there's a trough of low pressure here, this just works to pump moisture in the southeast all the way up to the Carolinas. It's all about Bermuda high. The Bermuda high is the top thing we will watch all summer long. Now, did you notice I said we don't have either of the two extremes? I'm just not seeing it. I'm just trying to piggyback off of what I shared with you last week in that long-range outlook. What I do want to make a point of saying is this. Right now, as we step this out there from April to May into June and then a little bit farther, most models are not picking up on an anomalous position of the Bermuda High. And as a result, where's the incentive to say that it's going to be in a position that's really just going to squash us with heat and drought? In fact, it may be displaced just a little bit farther south, but still that could pump moisture into us without any trouble. So I just want to kind of keep building this story, because at the end of this week, I'll get new long-range data from the European model. That'll come out on the 5th, and I'll include it in next week's video for you. All right, so we'll get to see out here again through summer. Okay, now let's come back to the near term and get this forecast wrapped up. We still have high winds down here in South Carolina. This was Sunday night. And then you can see here that we had flood watches out throughout parts of the mid-Atlantic, getting up here into New England. In the west, this is all hydrologic output. In other words, our hydrologic outlook, from melting snow and a big flood watch into this area. Freeze warning in parts of Nebraska. Cold morning tomorrow morning on Monday. All right, here's what the forecast holds. Let's pick this up on Monday morning at 7 a.m. We're going to look at precipitation first. We're going to watch this deeper low just sit and spin throughout the day on Monday. It's going to push some rain up into the Appalachian Mountains. Very, widely scattered showers coming across North Carolina, drier farther to the south you go. Then as we play this on through, this is now getting up to Tuesday morning. That low, remember, it's blocked, so it's not moving very far, which means we could see more showers in parts of North Carolina getting up into Virginia as we work our way out to early in the morning on Wednesday. From there, I'm going to pick up with the GFS versus the European model. This is 7 a.m. Wednesday morning. Just playing forward, what I'll be watching for is on Thursday, a low to come out of Missouri, sitting on a frontal boundary that could stretch precipitation over to us, maybe coming into parts of the Appalachian Mountains first here, Friday night getting into the weekend. It's another weekend where we have a chance for rain. So this takes you out to Sunday. So notice that's the first real chance of significant rain coming through this week. It's in both models here. So going through Saturday into Sunday, after that, I do want to keep a close eye for precipitation through the early part of next week, mainly Sunday into Monday, and a little bit into Tuesday and Wednesday. There's a potential for a low to be still sitting here by that time. Now, you notice I didn't see any just huge, deep lows like the one we just saw. The pattern, like I said, is making an adjustment. Things are flattening out. We're losing the big blocking systems. So if we add up that total precip, now remember, this is capturing some of what fell on Sunday afternoon, all right? But if we play this forward, the next chance at precip comes in. Watch Missouri. Here it is. This is Tuesday into Wednesday. There it is showing up. This is Wednesday through Friday. And then that pushes through parts of North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia later this week into the weekend. Now, there's the chance that this got more than an inch of precip in it. We're going to keep an eye on that. But then after that, remember, there's the secondary low that's coming out. It's weaker, but it's going to spread some more rain across this area as we get out there into early next week. All right, speaking of early next week, that would be the time where we start to see this weak ridging taking place, while there's a stronger subtropical portion of the jet stream cutting underneath it. And that's why the week 2 forecast looks wetter from eastern Texas over to Georgia, near normal precip for the Carolinas at this point. From here, let's talk about colder weather. Everywhere in gray is where we have the risk of a frost. So this is going to be on Monday morning, this is going to be on Wednesday morning, and we're still going to hit the Appalachian Mountains with some colder weather. But as I mentioned, we've got colder conditions throughout this week, and let's just play it forward here. This is what the highs are going to look like on Monday. A lot in the 60s here. Far southern Georgia cracks 70. This is where we get into Tuesday's highs and Wednesday. So see, we're still sitting in here 7 to 10 degrees cooler than normal. And as we get out there Thursday, watch the midsection of the country open up with a bit of warmth. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, rain, keeping things cool here. But as you saw, the pattern does start to moderate after that. But because of this next week is not really a week where we're picking up a lot of heat units. It's only far southern Georgia that's able to get more than 100 GDDs out of this next week. Normally for us in North Carolina, South Carolina, we could easily grab 120 GDDs at this point in early May. Okay, temperatures again. Remember, we're watching for this to move out as we get toward about May 8th, 9th, that time frame. And then the pattern's going to moderate according to the forecast models right now through the middle of this month. Finally, just want to give you a quick international update, if I can do that. There we go. We're still watching extreme heat in this part of Africa and the Iberian Peninsula, Spain and Portugal. We also see quite warm weather here in parts of Russia and Kazakhstan, while India is very, very cold. Much of Australia is back over to colder as they go through their fall, and you see more mild weather stretching here over the next 10 days in parts of Brazil and Argentina. And speaking of Brazil and Argentina, wet weather in Mato Grosso, this is big for the safrina crop. Very wet weather forecast in southern Brazil, hitting some drought acres down here, including Argentina. This is way too late in the year to do anything for Argentina's crop, but it will help out some of this crop we grow down here in southern Brazil if this rain comes through. Lastly, just want to point out the drought situation in Spain and Portugal. This is going to continue to be something we're going to watch for a while because I think it's going to show up hot and dry in the forecast for some time through the month of May. So I just want to give you that international update. I'll talk to you next week. Thanks.